this initial series is going to be a 6-week long series. The thought process at this stage is to compile and present a video each weekend, and then to open up and have online Zoom discussions in and around the principles discussed in the video. So we're going to be looking at things like what is addiction, how does treatment work, what is the role of the supporter, how does the supporter find healing and recovery, how does codependency and fear and old patterns of behavior impact the recovery process, what to do when things are not going well, and really just try and cover as many of those kind of topics as we possibly can. I don't want to get too ahead of myself at this stage until we've had some online discussions and until we've seen where people are wanting to lead this series. But we do have a rough idea of where that's going to be. So the first discussion will be this Thursday at 7 o'clock in the evening. We will run it on the Zoom platform. Zoom details will be posted. So today's topic probably covers what is addiction and how do we treat it. And I think to start off with, please, you guys are going to need potential pen and paper to take some notes, and I've also got some kind of question sort of homework for you guys to ponder about, so when we do have a discussion that we've got some starting points. The first kind of thing we need to look at is what is some of the myths around addiction. What does society believe about addiction? What do you believe about addiction? What have you been taught? We've got to understand that the societal myths around addiction have developed from some very flawed understanding of what addiction actually is. A lot of people claim that addiction is a response to pain and trauma. That somewhere in the addict's life there has been trauma, and that they carry great amounts of pain, and that their addiction has become a self-medicating pain treatment. A lot of people define this as a choice. They define it as something that we are almost morally corrupt, and that we haven't had the right upbringing, and we have been surrounded by the wrong peer group, and that it's been our friends or girlfriends or boyfriends or wives or teachers or the people that bullied us, whatever, that has pushed us to make this immoral choice. And our inability to choose to stop is a direct reflection on our inability to love and our inability to really kind of put other people first. Another broad area of myths is really looking at addiction from a family dysfunction point of view. This is where you probably come in and have a slight problem, and it's something that you need to start to look at is, as a supporter or as a part of a family of someone in addiction, do you perhaps view addiction as a result of family trauma, family dysfunction, upbringing, pain, etc.? Have you always looked at other people that go into addiction and quietly had a little bit of a judgmental attitude perhaps towards the family? And now all of a sudden it's in your home and you just can't understand how you got here, why it's happening, what went wrong, what you did wrong, etc., etc. So I think one of the first things that I really need you to write down this week is, what are some of the judgments you used to have about addiction? How did you see addiction, and how did you see the families in and around addiction? Problem B is that if you did have a judgmental attitude towards it, the minute it's in your home, it comes with a massive sense of shame and guilt, and it comes with a belief that you as a loved one must have done something terribly wrong. The next thing that one really has to kind of understand, and it ties in a little bit with this pain and trauma model of addiction, is number one, that addiction starts to develop in childhood, long before a substance picks up. That once the addiction starts from a substance perspective, the addict becomes the victim. The addict needs to come up with great validations and justifications and excuses for why they are actually going against their own moral fiber. And they have to start breaking down their own conscious view of the world. And this is done slowly but surely, placing blame, taking the victim, developing resentments, defining excuses for why we are able to do what we do, putting a lot of emphasis on how bad the family is, driving home the fact that we've never felt loved. A lot of things happen that we develop a perception that suits our choice of behavior. And I'm sure many of you have found that through the years of dealing with someone's addiction, that you have been put at the foot of blame, and that you have yourself been accused of horrendous things, and that you've been manipulated into a perception and a narrative of the addict. I don't think it will come as much of a surprise to you to understand that you have been lied to probably close on a decade. That a lot of what you understand your loved one's story to be is actually just built on deception and is not the truth. And that your whole understanding of who the addict is corrupted by the years and years and years of stories and lies and deception and manipulation. I think point number 2 for you guys to write down a little bit is to just, in a paragraph, write down the narrative of your loved one's life. Write down how you view your loved one. As someone with pain, as someone who's been the victim of something, as someone who just has bad luck, as someone who hasn't ever been able to succeed because the world just doesn't understand and accept them, as someone who's just had the bad luck of bad friends that's just susceptible to peer pressure, as someone that has terrible depression or anxiety or psychiatric disorders that are to blame. Like, where in our minds have we created this image of our loved one? And what is that image? That image, you need to get an image of what you see your loved one, the addict, as, because we need to challenge that image quite a lot. Task number 3 for this discussion, and related to this task number 2, is ask yourself a couple of questions. When do you think that your addict actually started to abuse substances? Now, for the sake of this thing, we can include nicotine, not that that's a substance, we'll talk about that later. We'll include alcohol, marijuana, and then hard drugs. When in your mind did this start? Why in your mind did it start? What is the excuse you've given to that starting point? And then what do you think caused it? Now, I ask these questions because they're important for us to start to question the validity of our own beliefs. I'm 99% sure most of you wouldn't even comprehend when some of this behavior started, and it is generally 2, 3, 4 maybe years before you actually thought it started. I must say that if you don't understand really when it started, the why did it start would be completely off track. Because if you think it started at, say, 16, 17, because of a girlfriend or a breakup or a whatever thing you can try and pinpoint to, if you think it started there because of that reason, you may be caught in a complete misunderstanding of what addiction actually is. And I am 900% sure that none of you can come up with the right answer of what you believed caused this addiction. And the one thing we need to start to develop in these series is to understand the cause of addiction. We're all looking for a specific event, a specific person, a specific time in the life that we can say, right, that didn't go so well, therefore my loved one turns to drugs to cope with whatever happened. And if we can just deal with whatever happened there, then the addiction will disappear and everything will be okay. The other problem that you have, if you read some of your answers and really get into it, if you see your addict as the victim, as you to blame, as poor little guy, as shame he's got depression, any of that sympathy victim nonsense, we're going to continue to treat them as such, and we will never get them to a place of actually understanding their own potential, their own worth, and their own responsibility for their life. And again, I reinforce, many of the stories, many of your understanding of your loved one's life to date is built upon lie after lie after lie after lie. It may hurt to come to realize that perhaps the person you think you know isn't actually that person. But trust me when I say it is a much easier point to grow and heal and recover from, being in a better place of truth. What we understand from a treatment perspective is that the perception the addict has of their life and their family may be the truth that they've lived their life in. So one's not trying to undermine their perception, but we know it is flawed and riddled with denial. If we're understanding addiction to have developed in childhood based on perceptions that children have, which are generally built on deep internal fears and anxieties and worries, fear of rejection, fear of abandonment, fear of inadequacies, social anxieties, not wanting to be the center of attention, people pleasing so that people like us. A lot of these behaviors you can see as a young child that develop to a point of, once an individual enters into society, they're already kind of trying to find external justifications for what they're feeling internally. They enter school and they often get bullied and picked on, and they often don't really feel like they fit in, and they often don't see themselves as good enough. That's all started long before. That's all started before the bullying started. That's all started before they got to school. And to be honest, not much anything or anyone could have done to have stopped that development. Understanding that internal process, one can understand the minute the individual came across the substance, and more so the culture surrounding the substance, that they found this sort of magical belonging. It becomes an experience that alleviates them of any of the internal struggles, and it becomes the most quickest fix to finding belonging, finding acceptance, finding purpose, finding freedom, being able to be who they want to be, finding all of those things. The substance is really just the entry point into an entire life that seems to be able to address many of the internal flaws and problems. From the moment the substances take effect and take center stage and enter into a person's life, the addict shifts their beliefs, their perceptions, their values, their attitudes, their thoughts, their behaviors to a narrative that starts to support continued drug use, which initially was never acceptable. Now, every addict that starts, say, let's start on marijuana, I'll never take hard drugs, then starts taking ecstasy, but I'll never take cocaine. Their value system before they take the next step is always anti what they're going to do. So somehow they need to establish a psychological defense structure that allows them to continue this behavior with a relatively guilt-free conscience. This is where things start to get very interesting for you as a supporter, because at this stage, what the addict is now presenting is blame, resentment, self-pity, emotions that are all over the place, depression, secretiveness, deception, manipulation, stealing, all in an attempt to kind of support this ever-increasing drug addiction. Now, many parents would have seen some of the behavior and would have written it off to a number of different problems. This is ADHD, this is just a phase, this is because he's got the wrong children, this is because he's struggling at school and his marks aren't good, this is because he's got the wrong girlfriend. We try to find reasons to validate why is the behavior shifting. The other problem you have and we have as addicts is that the minute we start using substances, we stop growing emotionally and we stop maturing. If that substance use continues, you will find that individual stuck in an emotionally immature place until such time as they've stopped the substances and spent enough time clean, and I'm talking a couple of years, to develop that emotional intelligence and maturity again. Part of treatment is taking the substance, the behavior, the culture away, which exposes the vulnerabilities, the weaknesses, the difficulties, the insecurities, the self-esteem, the rejection issues, the abandonment issues. It takes away all of the defenses that this individual's had to make themselves feel better about themselves and places them in a position where they feel extremely exposed and vulnerable. A lot of the times, this is a good point for us to really understand, a lot of the times people going through treatment are going to feel 10 times worse before they get better. And I think as a supporter, one has to understand an individual enters treatment, it's new friends, cool, I don't have the worries and the stresses and the chaos of my old life, I'm not carrying too many responsibilities. Places like Johara, this is actually fun. I feel accepted and loved. I'm not really craving. I feel like life is actually okay and manageable. And then all of a sudden, a month or 2 or 3 goes by, and slowly but surely, they're feeling a bit more depressed. They're feeling a little bit more uncertain about themselves. They're feeling confused. They're feeling like they don't have any control anymore. They don't know what their future looks like. They don't know where they're going. They're feeling like they don't know who they are, which is exactly where treatment takes a person once we've removed the defenses and the control and the psychological denial systems. So one thing, it's going to get worse before it gets better. Now, I don't want to go into too much of these details. What I do want to do, task number 4, I think we're on at this moment in time. Go onto one of our websites, addictions.co.za. Click on the addiction research page. You'll see there's a little bit of a paragraph there, and at the bottom of the paragraph, underlined, it says pilot study. Now, we did a research course program. Well, we did research in addiction development in childhood, and we toured the country, and we went and we got a lot of recovering addicts to answer questionnaires, and then we attempted to get these recovering addicts' parents and their siblings to answer similar questionnaires. If you go and read that research, you will start to understand the similarities that addicts in early childhood experience, and you will start to potentially see the similar observations that the parents of these addicts had during childhood growing up, ages 5 to 10. Take a while to try and really understand the study. If you need to skip down to the bottom, go and look at the parent questionnaire answers and go and kind of try and get a better view on what we're trying to say addiction is. We're going right away from the myth of trauma and pain and choice and family dysfunction to a very, very internal process that happens within each and every addict that then produces this addiction. We will discuss some of these statistics in our Zoom discussion on Thursday. I think it is just important that you try and get a good grips of what's happening there. Just from a Johara perspective, for those that kind of don't really understand what our program looks like, from a written work perspective, which ultimately just provides the knowledge and the understanding of different principles, and allows people to really guide their thinking into a healthier thought process. And from a written dynamic, we do have the 12-step program, which we've adapted. We have a sexual abuse, sexual addiction program that go with the support groups. Within the treatment, obviously sexual abuse is quite prevalent, even if it's prior to addiction, but also during addiction. There's also obviously quite a predominant sexual abuse, sexual addiction issue that goes along with many of our males and female residents. Now, when we say sexual addiction, we're just talking merely about dysfunctional relationships. And we're talking about the dysfunctional view of sex, and we're talking about how unhealthy that can become, specifically entering into a recovery journey. We then delve into codependency and boundaries. Got written workbooks for those. We've got written workbooks for many of the drugs of choice: cannabis, alcohol, cat, cocaine, crystal meth. The heroin one's quite cool. We have a gambling workbook. We have a gaming addictions workbook that's just come out. We've developed a victim mentality workbook, which is about to be released. And then we have obviously our self-esteem, social anxiety, perfectionism, anger, bipolar, etc., and eating disorders and body image workbooks. So along with the 12 steps, you can pinpoint many different booklets for individuals to work through. And these start to teach people where they've gone wrong in the past, how to make better choices, and how to manage their almost default setting in early recovery in order to build on a new identity and in order to build new kind of ways of responding to life. I'm sure, as you can understand, like if we look at each one of these booklets as being about 2 weeks long, one can start to see that there becomes a lot of work that needs to get done in order to produce a very, very healthy and sustainable recovery. Quickly before we end off, like obviously within treatment you have your group therapies, you then have your activities, and we really try hard to create good life experiences so that people can have healthy memories of when they learn principles, how to apply those principles. You know, we have the hikes and the outreaches and the camps and the activity weeks and whatever. We have very, 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 very good specialized group weeks. So Shame Week and Ego States Week and Culture Week. Again, each one of these specialized group weeks kind of fulfill time and deal with a lot of ingrained issues that otherwise would not really be brought to the forefront of the treatment process. Then you've got the psychiatric stuff. About 40% of individuals entering treatment have some kind of psychiatric condition, which limits the treatment process and progress, and is something that needs to be worked through and worked with in combination with the therapeutic process. The minute you have a psychiatric condition, be it OCD, psychosis, bipolar, depression, severe anxiety, whatever the case may be, the minute you have one of those that come into the mix, it complicates treatment and slows things down. One cannot get a healthy recovery from addiction without creating a healthy management of the psychiatric condition. So understanding your loved one's perspective, understanding the treatment process, one's got to look at the bigger picture and say, okay, there's a lot of issues going on here, and there's some psychiatric things. A lot of people come in on psychiatric medication. It's all the wrong medication 9 times out of 10, and they need to come off that medication and start on the right medication. That in itself is an 8 to 12 week process before it starts to even stabilize a little bit. And then obviously you have the spiritual component, which is something we kind of keep as an optional extra. Not that it isn't at the forefront of treatment and, really underpinning everything that we do at Johara. but it is something that a lot of people entering treatment are quite reluctant and resistant towards. There's been a lot of hurt and pain, and there's been a lot of misconceptions and misperceptions of spirituality and God before we enter into Johara. And so part of our journey of healing and recovery is also healing spiritually and removing some of the blocks and things that keep us away from our relationship with God. And yeah, that is an entirely different journey of healing. Some people like to jump into it, and other people are absolutely resistant to it. It's certainly not a requirement to complete Johara Treatment Center. It's certainly not something that we make the primary focus of our therapeutic activities, but it is definitely something that's needed. Definitely something that the guys need to get into. Unfortunately, yeah, what we've noticed is we're working with very, 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 I want to call them, they're not even blank canvases. We're working with people that have no spiritual upbringing. They've got no spiritual exposure to in childhood. Their schooling didn't teach it. Yeah, and so there's a lot of flawed understanding or absolutely no understanding at all on spiritual concepts and principles and beliefs. And yeah, I'm sure you can all relate to the fact that that is quite a broad and deep topic that could do with its own 6 to 9 month treatment program. So yeah, look, I hope there's been some information that's become valuable to you. I do encourage you to please go and do those tasks very briefly. I'll put them up on the screen shortly. And then I do invite you to come and join our Zoom discussion on Thursday at 7. I will post details of that shortly.